Ladies and gentlemen, I just ended up finishing the Frolova story 2 nights ago, and I gotta say, the power of schizophrenia hasn't been this useful since Maki started eating imaginary dinner with his father. The story was phenomenal, easily an 8 out of 10, and I'll be real, it would be a bold-faced lie if I said I understand why some people in the Wuthering Waves community is so split down the middle. Trust me, I really don't. Sure, from an omniscient reader's viewpoint, we could potentially feel bad for this depressed schizophrenic who could probably scale to God tier in the Bakiverse or be a Stardust Crusader level threat in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. But in Rover's eyes, from the character's perspective, she was the absolute face of terrorism in Renacita. If I were Rover, I wouldn't have been half as nice as Rover was to Frolova in the story. I would have been very mean. Rover was positively gentle, and I would almost say almost uncharacteristically so, but that wouldn't be true either. But there's also the fact that the character doesn't exactly strike me as someone who's rageful. I wouldn't even consider what happened between him and Cartethia to be rageful. But we'll get back to this later on into the video, if I remember to. Frolova and her stand definitely filled the spotlight in this patch. I may not be inclined to pull her even after doing the story, but her gameplay might change that potentially. But even then, I've played with her plenty, even refusing to use Rover in almost every case there was an option, and it's still not enough. But that won't stop me from calling Frolova's gameplay incredibly fun and entertaining. Walking around as someone who would most certainly be medically diagnosed with all sorts of mental instabilities that almost certainly channel in with bipolar depression and schizophrenia is certainly an experience. It definitely made the story that much more interesting. But speaking of the story, if you want my more in-depth take on the story, or overall just want to watch me do the story, go watch my stream and skip to 20 minutes in, or just skip towards the end where I'm essentially running around in circles because that's what I do in games when I get really into a discussion. It just happens. Also, because my microphone was actually going through my camera instead of my actual microphone on my desk, so I sounded like I was speaking to you through a bucket filled with moldy tap water. The environments in this patch were positively beautiful, and I don't know if anyone else put 2 and 2 together, but the water tunnels that you swim through function as really beautiful and immersive cutscenes to fully load and render in the other areas. I really enjoyed that aspect of it. Going through the levels felt like a fairly solid legacy dungeon for the game that it is, and I felt as though having them sort of instanced feels a little better to just overall walk around in and grab onto things without it feeling like a whole lot of overwhelming nothing. Sure, the overwhelming nothing can be as beautiful as possible, but I want more reasons to traverse through the overwhelming beautiful nothing. The fights were rendered completely and utterly unchallenging and useless with Frolova's insta-kill ability. Now, obviously on stream, I was absolutely loving this mechanic. I felt like some form of death god as I went on ahead on my kinky rampage and started asphyxiating my enemies and instantly killing them once they hit climax. This was certainly some form of female sexually dominating top activities. I love Frolova's little Higanbana flower thingy stick orchestra stick thing. It's wee cool. But of course, this ends up sucking the fun out of fighting for a lot of people, but you could always just kind of, well, not fucking use it. Throughout the time of exploring, I may have missed out on some hilarious opportunities, in my opinion, but I'm still overall satisfied with what I was able to do. Aside from the exploration and combat, I was really enjoying how Frolova and Rover are 2 sides of the same coin, but both have distinctly different visuals, and I don't mean it in terms of character design, I mean with their outlook on life and their own personal situations. With Frolova's irrational fixation on Rover's promise and her inhuman research and depressed trauma-filled obsession with saving her loved ones, it did an excellent job keeping Frolova as a villain through and through. There's a part of me that also feels like she's kind of fucking overclocking, considering she made an entire fucking dimension, but let's not get into it. Sure, you can feel bad for her, but the story elaborately tells you, screams it at you, that Frolova is wrong, and Rover's treatment of her is constantly reinforced and justified by Frolova's words and presentation throughout the story. Then there's Rover, whom we clearly have no idea why they proceeded to take their brain out of their skull, smash it repeatedly with a sledgehammer, reconstruct it, and then put it back into their skull, attaching their degrading brainstem to it, thus creating an entirely different person than what they were before, but still with some of the same mental features, I guess. And we can't currently judge whether or not Rover was right or wrong for that, you know, resetting themselves and all. Not until we get the full picture of Rover's past, but Both of these long-lived individuals are trying to solve their own problems in similar ways of starting over. Beginnings and ends are the antithesis they deal with when viewing each other. One is obviously currently being presented as irrational and evil, while the other is portrayed as mysterious and selfish. Frolova is just a character who doesn't understand why Rover did what they did, and that frustrates her, because hearing chastising remarks from another person whom they themselves don't even know what they did was the wrong thing can be unbearably frustrating. But we aren't here to keep discussing this at this level. Go to my stream and see what you think there, or go down into the comment section of this video. I would love to hear your thoughts. Now, it may seem like there isn't a lot of things going on in this patch aside from its good story and current event, but rest assured, we're going to be receiving a hell of a good time in the future. I'm talking absolute peak. So, to summarize, the story was amazing, the levels were fun, not as engaging as I hoped, but still fun. The visuals were stunning, and the new character, Frolova, an amazing addition to the Wuthering Waves cast. I'm really happy with her design, I'm really happy with her voice, I'm really happy with her gameplay, I'm just overall happy with this character, and I hope that Wuthering Waves continues on this path of making really good characters, and the stories inciting these sort of debates that the community has kind of been having, even though I don't really understand what there is to debate about. There isn't anything, really. It's pretty clear cut and dry. But anyways, tell me what you guys think. What's your take on the story, the gameplay, and the patch itself? And the patch itself so far, let me know in the comments below. But I want you all to take care, and peace.